Good evening, everyone. I leave 3 more minutes to give the opportunity to the last person to connect, and then we will start.
It's always strange to remain silent when we are waiting for people.
Yes.
So I've been offered to sing, but I've declined the offer. I think that you
Yes,
won't lose
you can
anything.
change your mind.
No, I think that's okay. Rain is already expected in Belgium, so I don't want to add anything to it.
It's quite long, 3 minutes. Okay, let's start. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the webinar Gene Therapy and its Analytical Specificities. This webinar will be presented by Gaëlle Deboeuf, who is the head of gene therapy at UCB. Hello, Gaëlle. I know that Gaëlle is very excited and enthusiastic to talk to you, so I will be very quick. I will make it short with the practical side. So the webinar will be in 2 parts, 30 minutes of presentation and then 30 minutes of questions. So to ask you question, please use the chat. Don't be shy, and we will be happy to answer to it during the Q&A session. So Gaëlle, it's all yours.
Thank you, Marine, and good morning, everybody, or good afternoon, depending from where you are connecting. I hope you hear me well, and it's a pleasure for me to be here with you and to introduce you to the fascinating gene therapy world. So the goal of this presentation is not to deep dive into details, but it aims to present a high-level view on gene therapy and to highlight how the analytical package might differ from the other biologics. So the purpose of this talk is also to be highly interactive and to foster exchanges. So to do so, I will try to be quick and to go through the slide deck in 30 minutes to let the time for questions and discussions. So a few words on myself and on how I came to gene therapy. I'm a molecular and cell biologist by training. I've completed a master in biomedical sciences at the Free University of Brussels, and I performed my master thesis in molecular virology, looking at the transcription activation of some factors involved in the HIV-1 viral latency. So then I moved to the University of Mons, where I completed a PhD in molecular biology. No more virology during my PhD, but a deep dive in studying the oncogenic potential of a protein and on splicing variants. Right after my PhD, I joined SGS, contract laboratory testing, where I had my first working experience in a GMP environment, so GMP standing for Good Manufacturing Practices, and on how to develop analytical methods to control the critical quality attributes of biopharmaceuticals. Right after method development, it was also the opportunity to evaluate method performance through method validations. After my stay at SGS, I've been offered to join UCB. It was 10 years ago. I joined UCB to head the bioassay development group. So the main activity of the bioassay development group was to develop and validate analytical method to control the biological activity of antibody-based drugs. So it was a fantastic opportunity to discover UCB pipeline and to cover bioproduct life cycles from preclinical up to commercialization. Early 2020s, I've been offered to explore a new horizon and to join the gene therapy arena as the head of gene therapy CMC analytical group. But I will come back later on what it means in practice. Few words about UCB. So UCB stands for Union Chimique Belge, and the company has been founded in 1928. So, as the name indicates, the company was initially clearly oriented in the production of small molecules. So by small molecules, I mean drugs that are synthesized chemically. 15 years ago, so it was the beginning of 2000, UCB has made the strategic decision to also develop biopharmaceuticals with some acquisitions. You probably remember UCB's acquisition of Schwarz Pharma and Celtec in the UK. So the strategic decision to move to biopharmaceuticals with a main focus on antibody-based drugs. So new approaches, but same therapeutic areas, namely neurology and immunology. So by neurology, UCB focus is really on epilepsy and Parkinson's diseases. In terms of immunology, it's quite broad. It starts from rheumatoid arthritis, lupus, psoriasis, osteoporosis, Crohn's disease, so everything that is related to inflammation and immunology. In terms of key figures, UCB is a global biopharma company, and by global, this is illustrated by presence in 36 countries, and the number of employees is slightly higher than 8,000. And the therapeutic solutions are helping more than 3 million or billion patients. What is quite unique to UCB, and this is something I would like to touch upon a little bit, is the percentage of revenue that is injected in research and development. So 26%, this is quite unique and very important compared to other biopharmaceutical companies. And this trend is maintained over the last years. And this somehow explains the importance of discovering new candidates, and this explained also the rich pipeline that we have at UCB. So the next slide, I should try to move to the next slide, okay, is illustrating some of the key values of UCB. Of course, patient is our main focus, but UCB is also putting a lot of efforts in developing and retaining talents through, for example, well-being and health and personal development plans. What is maybe less known is also the importance for UCB of being green. And this is demonstrated through internal programs with the key objectives to be carbon neutral by 2030. So being that said, it's probably no time to move to the concept behind gene therapy. So what is gene therapy? Gene therapy consists in therapeutic strategies that will introduce genetic material into cells to treat pathological disorders. And how do you do that? Either by inserting an LC copy of the mutated gene, inactivating a mutated gene that is functioning improperly, or by introducing a new gene into the target tissue, such as the retina in the body. To do that, there is two main delivery strategies. The first one is called the ex vivo strategy. So basically, you are taking out the cells from the patient, you are modifying the cells, and then you are re-injecting the cells to the patient. The second delivery strategy is to modify the cells directly inside the patient by the mean of a viral vector. And I will probably focus on this in vivo strategy in the rest of my presentation. So, as I said, UCB is using the in vitro strategy using viral vector-based therapeutics. And to go a little bit more in detail, the therapeutic strategy is to use AAV-based viral vector. So what AAV stands for? It stands for adeno-associated virus. And here is a kind of ID card of an AAV virus. So you have different serotypes from 1 to 10, and the serotype will lead to a different cell tropism. So for example, some serotypes of AAV will mainly transduce neural cell lines. Some other serotypes will mainly focus on infecting liver cells or muscle cells. So depending on the serotype, you will impact the tropism of the virus. AAV is a non-enveloped single-strand DNA virus. So this is a little bit counterintuitive because you might think that a non-enveloped virus are less resistant, but this is just the opposite. A non-enveloped virus is more resistant to some stress, such as the pH or the heat stress. What is also a characteristic to AAV virus is the fact that the virus is replication defective. So in order to be able to replicate inside the cell, the AAV needs another virus that is called the helper virus. So it's helper dependent. And one of the helper viruses is the adenovirus. And now you understand why AAV is called adeno-associated virus, because to be able to be replicative, AAV needs to be associated to an adenovirus. What is also the characteristic of the AAV virus is the small size of the insert. So the genetic information between the two ITRs, and that is quite small. It's below 4 kilobase. AAV is able to transduce or to infect dividing and non-dividing cells. And one of the characteristics is that the virus is mainly non-integrating. So some of the viruses, and especially the retroviruses, are able to integrate their genetic material into the host cell. It's not the case with AAV in the majority of the case, where the transgenic or the genetic material stay inside the cell under the form of an episome. What is another characteristic of AAV is the slow expression onset, and the fact that you might have pre-existing immunity that can limit the efficiency of AAV-based viral vectors. What's the difference between a wild-type AAV and a viral vector, so a recombinant AAV, is the fact that we've replaced the rep and cap gene, so that is present in the wild-type virus, by a gene of interest. So the gene that we would like the host cell to express. If I go to the next slide, we can clearly say that gene therapy is a fast-moving area. So today we have around 10 gene therapy products that have been approved on different markets. So you have the list here, and I put in green the list of gene therapy products that are based on the same viral vector strategy than the one from UCB. So in green, you have Glibera that is based on an AAV1 strategy, Luxturna on an AAV2, and Zolgensma AAV9. This is a fast-moving area because more than 20 other products are awaited to be approved by FDA by 2025. Now let's move to where we are at UCB in terms of gene therapy and where we are as part of the gene therapy map. So we are part of GT-CMC Sciences. So literally, this is the science to manufacture gene therapy products. And in other words, it's transforming an idea into a product. And by idea, I mean gene therapy candidates that has been identified in research into a product that can be injected in a patient. So again, in other words, this is transforming an advanced gene therapy candidate into a life-changing therapeutics that is delivered to patients. And that's why I like to see my team members as transformers. Again, we are part of GT-CMC Sciences. So what is GT-CMC Sciences? A key activity is to develop a reliable manufacturing process that will scale up the production from milliliters to hundreds of liters. So how does it work? I think that the production process, at least the first steps, are quite common to any recombinant protein production. So it starts with the cell expansion. So we start with a small vial of cell suspension that are then expanded into bioreactor. So in that vial, we have few ml of cell suspension. We culture them and we expand them. The next step is unique to gene therapy, where we will transiently transfect the cells with plasmids containing the different information. The first plasmid, usually we are talking about a triple transfection. The first plasmid will contain the transgene of interest. The second plasmid is containing the rep and cap gene that are necessary for replication and packaging. And the third plasmid will contain the helper virus genes that are required for the lytic cycle. So basically, the recombinant AAV are then produced and will be released into the supernatant. So from that step, we need to purify the product until we get to the final purified drug substance. So we have different steps of cell lysis. The residual DNA is then digested using an endonuclease treatment, and the process and the product is purified through different chromatography steps. So this is the production process, but we are part of GT-CMC Sciences and we are GT-CMC Analytics. So our mission is to develop analytical methods to guarantee that the product is of top quality along the manufacturing process. So basically, we are the 5 senses of the therapeutic solutions because we have to control the quality of the product from the different steps of production that we call the in-process to the product that will be administered to the patient. So we are also responsible of the quality of the product that is injected. So the interaction of the product with, for example, the injection system is also part of our scope. So as you've probably already understood, the scope of the gene therapy analytical team is very wide. So for the purpose of this presentation, I split the scope into 5 pillars. As part of our core competencies, we have to develop a robust formulation to ensure that recombinant AAV products are stable at a given storage temperature over a defined period of time. Consequently, this underlines a lot of different activities, such as formulation screening, developability assessment, and in-use compatibility studies to ensure that the product is stable during, for example, storage, shipment, and injection process. We have to control the critical quality attributes of the product. And to do that, we need to develop analytical methods. Of course, you have the compendial methods, so the methods that are described in pharmacopoeias, but we are also in our scope to develop non-compendial methods. And we can split again the method development area into 3 core competencies: molecular biology, bioassay, and physicochemical methods. And I will go deeper into the analytical package in 1 or 2 slides. As soon as we have analytical methods that have been developed and validated, the idea is to test product in routine. So we can, again, use compendial methods, so the methods that are defined in pharmacopoeias, and we can use the methods that have been validated as part of the method dev. So the goal is really to verify and test the input material, such as the plasmidic DNA, and the output material, such as the in-process samples, drug substance, drug product. And we do that also as part of the stability studies, or just to release products according to related specifications. One other area is also being able to manage project. And by one project, I mean one gene therapy drug. So we have to have competencies internally to be able to coordinate the planning, the budget, the resources constraints, and ensure analytical submission readiness. So to ensure that all the analytical missions have been completed throughout the different milestones and steps to reach the clinical phases. And this leads to the last competency, the compliance bit. We need to have an harmonized approach on quality practice and on ways of workings. I'm thinking, for example, about the way we manage equipment, about the way we manage compliance and data integrity conformance, and also the way we are preparing audits and inspections. This slide illustrates gene therapy as a new paradigm shift. So at UCB, as I said, the first focus was on small molecule. If I can make the link between the small molecule and the Lego, you can clearly see that a small molecule is not that complex to characterize. In a small molecule like Sirtec or Kepra, you have around 20 atoms. You can clearly see that this is much more complex when you move from a small molecule to a monoclonal antibody. And if again I use the same scale of comparison, the monoclonal antibody would be 10,000 times more complex than a small molecule. For gene therapy product, this is even more complex. So again, if I make the comparison with Lego, you can clearly understand that this is much more complex to characterize a recombinant viral vector compared to a monoclonal antibody. So this is raising additional questions on how to characterize the final product. Because indeed, in our field, the product is not the therapeutic compound anymore, but this is the combination of the viral vector and the genetic information. So once released inside the patient-targeted cells, the genetic material will be expressed to produce the therapeutic compound. So in terms of new questions, in terms of new critical quality attributes, we have to manage new topics. The first question will be, is my input of good quality? And by input, I mean the quality of the plasmidic DNA. So we have to have tools to measure the quality of the plasmidic DNA. The second question is probably, how much recombinant AAV particles do I have in my product? How much particles are full, so are containing the genetic information, and how much particles are empty? So we need to have tools, analytical tools, to measure the vector genome, titer, the capsid titer, the empty full ratio. So it's good to have viral particles in the product, but then the question will be, among these particles, how many particles are still able to infect a targeted cell? To do that, we need also to have analytical tools to measure the infectious genome titer. If I go a little step further, among these viral particles that can infect a cell, how many are still able to use the cell patient machinery to produce the therapeutic compound? So again, we need to have analytical tools to check that, such as transgene expression assay at the messenger RNA level, at the protein level. And finally, the last step of complexity amongst the viral particles that can infect a cell and produce a therapeutic compound, what is the amount of therapeutic compound that is still biologically active? And to address that question, we also need to develop analytical tools like relative potency assay. So you can easily understand that the analytical package that is related to recombinant AAV is quite complex. And here, this is a typical recombinant AAV analytical package that you can find in the literature, and as it is presented by Tustian in a recent review published in 2021. So the author is splitting the attributes in different items like quality general, safety concerns, strength, identity, purity, process-related impurities, and potency. If you compare that analytical package to an analytical package used for a recombinant protein, you will see some things that are common to both analytical packages. But what is specific to gene therapy, to me, is the rise of molecular biology techniques, especially the techniques that will allow to measure the viral genome titer. So you will find a lot of PCR readouts as part of the package. So this is a nice combination, finally, between biochemistry, molecular, and cell biology. Another characteristic of the gene therapy analytical package is that what I'm presenting today is a picture of the analytical tools that are available. But innovation is really key, meaning that these analytical tools are evolving constantly. So what is true today will not be true in 1 year or in 5 years. We need to develop new analytical tools to improve our sensorial system. I'm coming back to the 5 senses that I mentioned earlier. The idea is really to increase our understanding on the viral particles, how it behaves, what is the impact of the process on the critical quality attributes. One example would be on new tools that allows to characterize the empty and full particles. I could spend hours to describe the tools that are available at the moment. I'm especially thinking about analytical ultracentrifugation. This is a new tool that allows to thanks to the difference of sedimentation between a full particles and an empty particles, to split and quantify the amount of full versus empty particles. So the point that I wanted to make here is that maybe even more than for the other recombinant proteins, innovation is key. Flexibility is really important, and adaptability. So thinking out of the box, looking for innovation, looking for new analytical techniques are key, and will define the future golden standard in the field. A classical analytical life cycle from development to patient starts with the development of fit for purpose assays. So usually we want to measure a critical quality attributes, I don't know, like the capsid titer using an ELISA. We need to develop an ELISA method that is fit for purpose. So what does it mean? Fit for purpose is that the assay should fit with the objectives of the method. You want to have a quantitative method, for example, that would be high throughput. So it means that you can perform the analysis of, I don't know, 10, 50 samples at a time. So maybe the format of the plate will have an importance here. So you can move from 96 well plate to 384. So you need to develop an assay that fits with your development objectives. And you estimate, you optimize the assay characteristic, you change the incubation time, you change the way you perform the readout, you change different analytical steps. But at the time, you will consider that the assay is fit for purpose, and you stop changing the analytical parameter. And it's time to validate the assay. And the validation step ensure that you check the performance of the assay. And by performance of the assay, I mean, is the assay specific? If the assay is meant to be quantitative, do I have a linear relationship between the theoretical concentration and the concentration that are measured? Is my assay accurate? Is it variable? So this touch to the assay precision. Is my assay robust? And by robust, I mean, if I change some analytical parameter with a small variation, will it impact the assay result? So this is the validation step, just to check the performance of the method that has been developed. As soon as the method has been validated, then it's time to transfer the assay into a routine environment. So it means that then the assay will be used routinely to ensure product release. So product release for clinical development studies or to release the product on the market. We could also perform the assay to support stability studies. And this is not the end of the journey because this is a life cycle. You need also to think about continuous improvement and innovative assay format. For example, if you've developed an ELISA A to check a characteristic, and then you discover a new technology that is probably more powerful in terms of sensitivity, in terms of specificity, then you might be tempted to compare the two assays and to replace the old format into a new format. And this is called the life cycle management. What would be the gene therapy CMC analytics ideal candidate? Of course, you need to be appropriately trained or to have the appropriate background. And by background, I mean, as you've seen in terms of analytical package, molecular biology, cell biology, and biochemistry are key, and this should be reflected as part of your study background. You need also to be aware about the constraints that are linked to work in a GMP environment, because indeed, the goal is to validate the assay. So you need to have the full traceability of what you are doing. So in terms of documentation and data integrity, this is key. You need to be prepared about the increased workload that is associated to that traceability. You also need to have specific skills that are linked to lab work. Of course, able to generate results, but on top of that, being able to interpret the results and propose solutions to present and to discuss results in a team meeting, in a department meeting, in a conference, in a webinar. What is maybe more specific to gene therapy is to have practical experiences in the tools that are currently part of the gene therapy analytical package. And of course, having a previous experience on AAV-based therapeutic will be a key asset. Finally, from a soft skills point of view, being agile. So I mean, being able to work on different projects with different priorities, being pragmatic, being a team player, and having some written and verbal communication skills is nice to have, really nice to have. But on top of that, being able to think out of the box, being able to be flexible and agile is really key. So in a nutshell, this is a very high-level presentation on gene therapy analytics. I will stop here. I'm sure that you have plenty of questions, so I think that Marine will moderate this point, and I'm happy to address your question. Thanks for your attention.
Thank you, Gael, for the presentation. Yes, you already have questions. So I just repeat, don't hesitate to write your question in the chat. You have already a first question from Akashiaba. What is the way forward for the treatment of disease like diabetes, etc.?
Haha, this is an interesting question, and this is probably way beyond my level of expertise. But you have to understand that in pharma, you have different steps, and I think that this is more a question for my R&D colleagues, where they are making the link basically between a therapeutic area, a therapeutic need, and how to address that need. I said that it was probably the scope of my R&D colleagues, but not only. I think that this is also in the scope of academic lab. We need to have the support of academic research to better understand how a disease works, what are the root cause of a disease, and based on that, we can apply therapeutic strategies.
Okay. Then you have a question from Mahesh. What could be recovery and percentage of encapsulation at a phenyl DS level?
Ooh, this is really specific. This is really specific. This is a good question because this is a hot topic amongst the regulatory field because some of the clinical trials have been put on hold because of side effects that might be related to the amount of empty particles. So looking at the characteristics of how many full particles you have in your final product over the empty particles is really key. If you ask the question to health authorities, they won't never tell you what is acceptable or what is not acceptable. I think that what they are expecting is to have a number that can be justified through non-clinical results or by any justification. So it will be extremely difficult for me to come with a number, but I would expect to have something at least above 50% full. But again, this is a case-by-case evaluation that needs to be also justified with scientific data.
Okay. We have another question, specific question from Mahesh. While development of a CP ELISA, how to manage the quality control or internal control sample stabilities that give us the exact quantification during ELISA?
This is 100 of questions in one question. If I understood correctly, the question is about the monitoring of host cell protein through ELISA. So indeed, most of the time, the cell line that is used to produce a recombinant AAV is based on a human cell line that is called HEC293 cells. So the idea is to get rid of the HEC293 cells in the downstream process. So after all the purification step, and the idea is to monitor the HCP clearance over the downstream process. You have commercial kits that are available to quantify the amount of HCP and to demonstrate that clearance. But indeed, what might be expected from health authorities at a point is to demonstrate that the antibody that you are using as part of your HCP ELISA kit are representative to your production cell line and not to a production cell line like one type of HEC293, because you might have different types of HEC293 that will be used in your manufacturing process. So what could be of interest would be to characterize the coverage of your antibody used in the HCP ELISA kit compared to your own manufacturing cell line. Not sure that I was clear. I hope that I addressed the question of Mahesh.
Okay. I have another question from Thomas, who said, thank you, Gaël, for this presentation. What will be the best next improvement of immunoassay technology method?
In MOA assay?
In immunoassay, immunoassay, sorry, it's my accent.
It depends. To do what? To evaluate which critical quality attribute. Are we talking about the improvement of an immunoassay to look for the host cell protein? Is it an immunoassay to monitor the capsid titer? So it will really depend. I think that the key point here is to make the link between your critical quality attribute control, so what you want to measure and how you want to measure it. But you have plenty of new technologies in the field of immunoassay. So from an ELISA, you can move to other technologies like Alpha-LISA. You can also increase the throughput using microfluidics, like it is proposed by the Gyrolabs or Gyros technology. But again, this will depend on the need.
Vincent Dubois asks you, is the analytical pack shown considered as a standard approved by authority for AAV products, or it's more product specific?
This is a standard for a standard recombinant AAV product, but depending also on the product specificities, health authorities might ask to have additional controls. I'm especially thinking about process-related impurities, depending on what you are using in your process. Let's take an example. If as part of your process you are using a culture medium containing insulin, of course, health authorities will be interested to see clearance method that demonstrate that you get rid of the insulin after your downstream process. So this is, again, a standard package, but this is not set in stone. So probably the answer to that is this is a good starting point as an analytical package, but then the engagement, an early engagement with health authorities for that product specific analytical package will be key and will maybe show if additional controls are required or not.
Thank you. Alessandro Vanti asks you, what is the best technique to assess the transfection step?
Ooh. This is more a process-related type of question. But I think that as part of the process development or supporting assay, you will have the VG titer, the capsid titer, and probably the empty full. This is what is coming to my mind immediately. So you will adapt some process development steps like changing the transfection reagent and see what would be the impact on the number of particles that you have at the end of your upstream process. And the number of particles, again, you can look at it by looking at the number of genome copy, so through the VG titer, and it can be using PCR-based techniques. You can look at the number of capsids using an ELISA, but I would recommend to use both and to look also at the empty-full ratio using AUC, for example, or another technique that that would be appropriate to measure the empty-full. One of the challenges associated to that will be to get rid of the matrix interference effect. Because don't forget that if you are measuring something in an in-process sample, this is not a purified product. So you need to ensure that the method is robust and the result is not affected by the matrix effect. In-process steps might be dirty compared to drug substance or drug product.
Hervé asks you, I'm not sure to fully understand how AAV modified our produce. So you have cell culture, then you put the desired gene in it, then the AAV to infect the cells and take the gene in the meantime.
So I think that it's coming back to this point. AAV is a modified product because compared to the wild type, you've removed the rep and cap gene and you replaced the rep and cap gene by the gene of interest. So the recombinant AAV is modified in the fact that it won't produce any more rep and cap. It will only produce the gene of interest.
I hope it's clear for you, Hervé. Mahesh asks, are you guys using any analytical techniques for VP1, VP2, and VP3 proteins estimation, which can give us quality of AAV?
Yes, indeed, this is part of purity analysis, where we are looking at the VP1, VP2, and VP3 that Mahesh is referring to are the three protein subunits that make the capsid, so the protein envelope of the virus. And of course, as part of the purity assessment, you can look at the VP1, VP2 through SDS page, capillary electrophoresis. Some teams are also using Western blotting to do that and to be able to also quantify the ratio between the VP1, VP2, and VP3.
Okay, we have a question from Mahesh. Is there any chemical region, transduction region, that can improve the transgene delivery? Oops, slides move. During AAV potency assay.
Whoa. Can you say it again?
Is there any chemical region that can improve the transgene delivery during the AAV potency assay?
Okay, so we are talking about transduction efficiency. So transduction efficiency is how the product can infect or transduce a targeted cell. And the question of Mahesh is there any chemical compound or reagents that can facilitate somehow the entry of the recombinant virus into a targeted cell?
I think yes.
I think it's a case-by-case evaluation. You will have some. This is really related to the capsid and the serotype of the AAV. If you take, for example, an AAV2, this won't be a major issue to transduce HEC293 T cells. You might have a lower transduction efficiency with other serotypes. So this is a case-by-case evaluation. And yeah, this is a good question. You might test different reagents to improve that transduction efficiency, but this is part of a specific method development for a potency assay. rather than considering different reagents to improve the transduction efficiency, I would propose to test different cell lines that are probably more responsive to the transduction of a specific recombinant AAV.
Okay. I have a question myself. What are the differences if you talk about monoclonal antibody production and gene therapy production? What are the differences between both?
The scale, mainly the scale. If you produce a monoclonal antibody, you will probably go at a commercial scale, to bioreactors of 10,000, 20,000 liters. It's quite big. If you make a commercial production of a recombinant AAV, you will decrease the scale from 20,000 liters to 500 liters, 200 liters max. So you are decreasing the scale by at least a 20-fold factor. So the consequence of that is also what I call the sample tax or the QC tax. So the volume of samples that will be needed to control the quality of your product. It's not rare in recombinant AAV to use between 40 to 70% of the production for QC and stability analysis. This is massive.
Yeah.
But the consequences are probably less important than recombinant AAV. Don't forget that for monoclonal antibody, most of the time, we are talking about the treatment of chronic diseases with multiple injections of monoclonal antibodies. Here in gene therapy, what is unique is that it's a single injection. You won't have regular injection of gene therapy product from the same product, because of immunogenicity event. So you will inject your recombinant AAV, and then the patient's body will produce antibody against the product. So most of the time, we are talking about a single shot a therapeutic.
Thank you, Gael. And there is a lot of serotype. What is the implication in drugs?
This is a good question. Basically, depending on what you would like the therapeutic to do, you will choose a specific serotype. You won't select the same serotype if your targeted cells is cells in the liver or cells in the central nervous system. On top of that, some groups are working on engineering the capsid protein. So to modify the protein of the capsids to give a unique characteristic of the product over, for example, a tropism for a certain type of cell. Or even some groups are modifying the capsid to be able, for example, to pass the brain-blood barrier. So the idea, there is some publications around that rather than injecting the product in the brain, that are changing the structure of the capsid or modifying the protein of the capsid to be able to inject the recombinant AAV systematically. So in the systemic administration, and then the product would go directly into the brain.
Thank you. I don't see any more questions for the moment. We have space for one more question if someone wants to ask it.
Mahesh?
I don't think so. Sarah Lee. Does UCB
Sarah
plan?
Uli? Oh,
Yeah.
hello, Sarah.
Does UCB plan to collaborate with contracting laboratories for QC assays?
I know Sarah. I know that she's working in a contract laboratory testing lab. Yes, why not? Of course. The idea is also to take the expertise where it is. So why not? I would say.
Okay. Perfect. So there is no more questions at the moment. I need a few minutes. Okay.
Thanks for all the questions. It was really interesting also on my side to see what kind of question could be raised from the presentation. This is not the end. If you want to contact me directly through LinkedIn, if you want to continue the discussion on specific analytical topics related to gene therapy products, I'm happy to continue that discussion with you guys. You can easily find me on LinkedIn, so don't hesitate. And thank you again for Jefferson Wells to contacted me for this webinar. It was a huge pleasure.
Thank you very much to you too. I don't see any more questions for the moment. So yeah, thank you very much for the presentation, for your time, Gaël, and thank you for your participation. And I wish you all a good evening. Bye
Thank you.
bye.
Have a
Thank
good evening.
you. Good
Bye.
evening. Bye.